What's up, movie lovers? We're the Hills Maniacs, and this is round 3, the final round of our movie franchise tournament that we've been doing the past couple weeks, where we were basically comparing all of our favorite movie franchises in tournament-style brackets to determine what we feel was the greatest movie franchise of all time. We started off with 12, then we had 6 last week, and now we have our final 3, which we're going to talk about today. So let's get into it. So we have our final 3 for this tournament is the Harry Potter franchise versus the Pixar franchise versus the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is going to be tough to decide because these are all, basically, these are all fantastic franchises.
Right.
Taking nothing away from any of the ones that we've, eliminated from the tournament over the past couple weeks. I mean, they were all...
Right.
There's a reason they're all our favorite franchises. We go back and watch all these franchises, but if you watch the other 2 videos, the way we compared them and things like that, the things we said, compared to each other, these one franchise is better than the other.
Right.
But now we're in the final 3, a triple threat of movie madness, fantastic movie franchises.
Yes.
It's hard for me to decide, honestly.
I mean, see, the way I'm going to base it, I'm going to go solely on not what I've seen more, not what I'm a bigger fan of, because if that was the case, I would be towards Harry Potter, and that's not fair. What I'm going to base this round on is strictly how many movies from each franchise that I didn't like. And I did this in the previous rounds, but then I also included some other stuff. This one is going to be strictly based, for me, on how many movies I didn't like versus how many are in the overall franchise. So I think for me, it comes down to it basically eliminates the MCU, and there were more movies that I didn't like for certain reasons in the MCU. You look at like Thor: The Dark World, Iron Man 2,
right.
Captain Marvel. Just movies that for me I could care less about. Even Incredible Hulk, I guess you could throw in there too. And Pixar and Harry Potter really don't have that. I love all 8 Harry Potter movies. I've watched them more than anything.
Right.
Pixar, I haven't seen every movie, but of the ones I've seen, I don't think there's been one that I'm like,
I mean,
this movie sucks. Whereas MCU, I can't pick MCU over Harry Potter or Pixar because of how many movies I don't like.
Now, I kind of agree with that. I mean, with the MCU, it's like some of the movies could have maybe been excluded. Like, I didn't feel like we needed Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Or Ant-Man and the Wasp.
I feel like they could have just gone from Guardians of the Galaxy and then picked up with those characters when they intercept the transmission from Thor's ship at the beginning of Infinity War.
Right.
And then, they bring Thor, they rescue Thor and everything else after Thanos destroys their ship. I feel like I could have gone from that straight into that. Like, I didn't feel like we needed... The only thing Guardians Volume 2 did was, introduce Mantis, which we don't need. We talked about her in our Who is the Crappiest Character in the MCU video. Check that one out if you haven't seen it. But, like you said, with the MCU, it's like there are some movies that could have been excluded. There are some that I didn't even like. But the thing that I do like about the MCU, though, is that... I mean, you don't necessarily need to watch every movie in the MCU, but certain things that happen in each movie is what makes it... Like, they purposely put things
they connect them.
One movie to connect it to another, and it's mostly connected through end credit scenes. So really, some of the movies you don't need to see in order to kind of understand what's happening. Like, if you didn't even watch any of the original, the first Captain America movie, the first 2 Iron Man movies, or Thor or Hulk, and you just started with the Avengers movie, the first Avengers, you probably wouldn't have even... You would probably still kind of understand what's going on. Like, okay,
right.
I mean, yeah, you might not know who these characters are, and you'd want to go back and watch them, but, I don't think you needed to watch those to appreciate how good of a movie like the Avengers was, and it was just cool to see these individual heroes coming together and things like that. But with like, you know, the Harry Potter franchise, like you said, you do need to see each movie in order. You can't like watch it in a different order or anything like that.
That's true.
The MCU, you can kind of do that. You can go back and watch things in a different order.
I mean, Pixar's the same way though as the MCU. And Pixar, you know, you can watch basically any movie.
Pixar, the movies aren't really connected other than like by Easter eggs. That's my point.
Like you don't have to watch the Pixar movies. Like there's no certain order. Except maybe like the ones in like the Toy Story movies, you might have to watch those in order.
No,
like you don't have to watch them in order for the overall Pixar.
But the way I look at this comparison, though, it's like for me, I look at the movies that I would understand more, and for me personally, I didn't really understand or get that interested in like the Harry Potter movies. Like I understand the basic premise of it, you know, like he's a wizard and he didn't know he was a wizard because he was born into it and things like that, and there's an evil force, but why is he only targeting a school pretty much? But like Pixar, you know, I've been into those movies for years. I did a video on why you should watch Pixar movies. Go check that out if you haven't seen that. So if I were to eliminate one from these final three, for me personally, I mean, it'd be the Harry Potter franchise, but I know we're not going to agree on that.
Well, see, but I said get rid of MCU. So based off of what we're saying, if I'm getting rid of MCU, you're getting rid of Harry Potter, I guess that technically means that we both agree that Pixar would be better than both.
Yeah.
And I mean, looking at it, you look, you know, and we mentioned it in the last video, how there's that kind of emotional attraction to these Pixar movies. Whether you're a kid or an adult, you can relate in some aspect to whatever the topic is of each individual Pixar movie. Whereas like in Toy Story, you know, it shows the life of a kid with his toys, where the toys come to life, and you know, and that as a kid, that's what every kid imagines. You know, it puts this life. We put this life into our toys. You know, and so that movie really, you know, built off of that. And then you look at movies like Inside Out, which actually focuses on emotions. You look at movies like Up, that's supposed to kind of tug at your heartstrings a little bit to make you realize, you know, how important certain things are in life versus other things, you know, and then basically just the overall journey of doing something that you know, him and his wife wanted to do the entire time but could never do it because of setbacks, and then to finally get to do that certain thing, you know, and it basically teaches you different life lessons in each Pixar movie. And they're not even real. Like, they're all animated. But each one basically gives you some type of lesson, I feel, as to whether it's life itself or something that happens in life or whatever it may be. And that's why I think Pixar made it so far into this tournament to make it to the last round. And that's why I personally, even though I like MCU and Harry Potter, I would put it above both of the other two.
I'm gonna say Pixar wins, because even though I like the MCU, like all the things that you just said about Pixar is what makes it so great. And in Pixar there were some kind of movies that were, you know, people didn't really like. I mean, you're gonna get that in every franchise. Cars 2, or Cars 3, I've heard actually too. I didn't really like Finding Dory that much either. But when you look at Pixar, you know, it has the basic, like, everything you'd need in a good story is pretty much in all these movies. You know, you have protagonists, you have antagonists, or even if it's not necessarily, there's not actually, like, a main villain, it's just, like, some antagonistic force or something that these characters are struggling with or whatever that goes against them. And not only that, but these movies are just fun to watch and rewatch and watch again and things like that.
No matter how old you are, too.
Yeah,
That's the good part.
exactly. They play to everybody, whether it like you might understand it more. Like if there's some kind of like maybe adult humor in these movies or something, like you'd understand that as an adult,
or something that like only adults might, or something like a struggle at work or something. You know, like something that only adults would focus on, or something that only kids would understand. You know,
it's something that might be funny to kids, isn't necessarily funny to adults. Something that's funny to adults might not be funny to kids, whatever. But you don't really get that in the MCU like as much now that I think about it. The MCU, while it did do something unique with having 23 movies that all intertwine with each other, like that's never been done before.
Right.
In terms of like them being different movies. Like, obviously, like, Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and stuff, like, it's all in the same universe, so it's all connected because it has to be.
Yeah, and it's all one story.
It's all one big story, if you think about it. Where the MCU is, like, different stories that all connect at one end point, and then it's continuing on again and again and again. But I feel like with Pixar, they're all the movies are so different and unique that it makes it a lot better and more fun to watch. Like, MCU is fun with, like, superhero things.
Yeah.
And you kind of feel the struggles
and
of
the
these
action
heroes.
in some of them, especially, like, the Avengers. But also, you look at Pixar and you compare it to Harry Potter, which has books as a source material. The MCU has comic books as a source material. Pixar doesn't have that. So this world, if you will, of Pixar, or worlds of Pixar, they were all created just in the mind of somebody. This whole concept for like Toy Story, for example. Somebody had to sit down and think, let's make a movie about toys coming to life. And
on the surface that seems like just a generic story. My toys
but then you look deeper at it, and not just at the story itself, but at the stuff behind it. Like, somebody had to think of this. There was no source material for this.
Yeah, they had to come
there
up
were
with
no
this on
books.
their own,
There were no comic books. There were no plays or nothing that they could make this off of. They had to think of this basically on the spot, write a script, and then animate it and put it into a movie. And that's why this is, whereas like we said in the last one, you can only do so much with books because you can't really change much without changing the story itself. And with comics, you have a lot more free range because there's a lot of open space. But
with Pixar,
there's nothing, so you can do whatever you want. There's nothing. People can't be like, oh, I don't like that because it wasn't the same as the source material, because there is no source material for it. You just create this, and then they leave certain gaps in certain places for you to imagine, and that's what a good franchise, I think, is supposed to do.
Now, if you look at it, like, if we were to just compare Pixar and MCU, I feel like both of these franchises are going to go really far into the future. Like, there's a lot more in store for both franchises.
Probably.
Whereas, like, Harry Potter, it's over. Yeah, no,
it's done. I mean, other than Fantastic
Beasts, it reached its peak where it was supposed to reach with, because it used the books as the source material. It did what it was supposed to do, and it's done. Like I said last week with the Lord of the Rings,
Right.
We're never going to see another Lord of the Rings movie, probably, unless they write another book to continue off of it. But, like, with Pixar and the MCU, these are still continuing things.
Yes.
Like, even if the MCU does grab from certain comic stories, and Pixar just has to make up their own stories, it's still, these are two franchises that are going to continue into the future. And maybe even Disney as well, because they just make up stories constantly.
Right.
Like, every year, I feel like we get at least one Pixar or Disney movie of some kind. Right. Whether it's animated or live action, Disney movies and things like that. And the MCU, it's like they have a plan. They're continuing on with their connecting tissues for each movie and things like how each of the movies will continue to connect with each other and things like that. So these are the two biggest movie franchises, like, people are going to be talking about for years to come, I feel like. But yeah, I would say Pixar is probably better just in terms of story and everything else.
And so I guess we're technically then in agreement.
We're in agreement
that Pixar, surprisingly, beats out every other basically every other franchise that was included in this. And I guess your winner is Pixar.
Yeah,
then.
you can't. I don't think you can go wrong with Pixar.
Right. So, I mean, surprisingly, Pixar beats everything, and it's well deserved.
Pixar is the greatest movie franchise of all
Well-deserved.
time, according to our tournament. So, let us know what you guys think down in the comments section. Did we make the right choice?
I think so.
Do you agree with our decisions throughout this entire tournament? And also, let us know what other kind of tournament you'd like to see us do. We might, since Pixar won this one, we might get into comparing all the Pixar movies in a tournament as well.
That would be fun.
And be sure to like this video and subscribe for more. And we will see you in the next video, guys.
Bye, guys.
Subscribe.